Hey y'all, it's Mary Hyatt, and I'm so excited you're here for this month's topic, which is all about necessary endings. It's October, y'all, and as the old saying goes, the trees are about to show us how lovely it is to let dead things go. This month, we're going to be able to explore how to release the things, people, habits, and behaviors that are no longer serving us, and to ultimately stop watering our dead plants. All right, y'all, it is going to be good, so let's get into it.
Welcome to the Living Fully Alive podcast with Mary Hyatt, here to help you find your authentic voice, learn how to love yourself, and embrace your life. And now, your host, life and mindset coach, body love advocate, and doTERRA Presidential Diamond, Mary Hyatt.
Hey everybody, it is Mary, and I am so excited for today's episode because this is the episode where we bring on an expert in the area of the topic of the month, which, as you guys know, is necessary endings. And I'm so thrilled to introduce you to Juan Santos, who is a professional counselor and book author who specializes in helping people go from stuck to deeply connected in their relationships. You might even say he is a relationship guru. Seriously, he is brilliant. And what I love about Juan is that he utilizes a creative, off the book approach when helping people overcome challenges and live their best lives. He's not your typical, counselor. He is fun. He is full of life. He is always contributing laughter to the conversation. And he is also a successful owner of Santos Counseling, a family-owned counseling practice in Greensboro, North Carolina. And what I love about him too is that he is a family man. He practices what he preach. And so when he's not working, he loves spending time with his family, enjoying the outdoors, going on family adventures with his wife and his two kids. And we have a really great and beautiful conversation around kind of a heavy, hard topic, talking about relationships and necessary endings. And this is one that you're not going to want to miss. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Juan. Hey guys, it is Mary, and I am so excited for today's episode. As you guys know, every month I bring on a special guest expert to talk about our theme of the month, which this month, as you guys know, is necessary endings. And before I bring him on, let's have a quick little recap of the past two episodes that we've talked about this topic. They have been so good, so I definitely encourage you to go back, take a listen, and of course, share them with people that you know that it was totally resonate with. Y'all, man, last week I had my boyfriend on, Bentley Caldwell, and I know you guys just love him as much as I do, or at least a little bit. He's so great. We had such a fun conversation, and hopefully it felt light and yet also made you think and gave you some, nuggets of wisdom from his journey of walking away from the old you. We talked about him leaving his music career, stepping into kind of this new version of himself, and what it looks like to, as you grow, create a new identity from maybe something you thought you'd always be, sometimes just how people see you, and really updating that to this new version, new identity that is going to hopefully lead you into a whole brand new future. So that's a really, just like I said, candid, fun conversation. Go back and listen to that. And then the first episode, I talked about the beauty of letting go, kind of introduced the topic. It's a foundational episode where we looked at how our belief of what is to come, sort of what is the next place that we're headed, our future, the belief has to feel more compelling than the fear. And oftentimes, even when we feel that nudge, even when we feel those little whispers that are calling us forward to evolve and to change and to grow, we have a lot of fear that can hold us back. So I talk about that in that episode, the beauty of letting go. So again, go back, take a listen. But today's guest, as you guys heard, is Juan Santos. Juan is so amazing. I'm so excited. We're going to have just a beautiful conversation around letting go inside of your relationship. So I know that probably off the bat, some of you are going, oh my gosh, is she going to tell me I need to get divorced? I'm not sure I want to listen to this. I want to promise you to hang on, take a listen to the whole thing, because we're not going to just talk about how you know when it's time to leave a relationship, but what happens when you've been in a relationship for a really long time, and how does necessary endings apply to long-term relationships? So even if you're single, if you've been married for a few years, for a long time, if you're contemplating leaving a relationship, this is a great episode for you. So without further ado, Juan, welcome to the show. I am so excited and glad you're here. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Hey, I'm excited too. I'm excited to be here with you to share some stories, maybe get some good laughs, and hopefully get people a little more comfortable with necessary endings.
Yes. I mean, it's kind of like a topic that can feel a little scary or a little awkward. And I'm sure that most of your conversations inside of your office kind of start out a little awkward. But I want to know from you, just because for a lot of people listening, this is their first introduction to you. Tell us a little, like, Juan, history. How did you get interested in counseling? Why are you passionate about it now? Kind of give us a recap of your counseling journey.
Yeah. All right, guys. Hold on tight. It started about 1,000 years ago. No, I'm just kidding. As you can tell, I love to laugh. My mom said that I was born smiling, so I enjoy that a lot. Again, my name is Juan Santos. I'm married to my wife, Elizabeth. We've got 2 kids. And, as a parent, if you're a parent out there listening, sometimes you see your kids and you're like, you got too much of me. So my daughter, she's very hyperactive like I am. And there's times that I'm like, oh, you should have rubbed off a little bit more on your mom, who's calm and she's able to think through things. So that's my daughter, Nola. And then my son is Alex. We're a family of 4. My wife, she's Caucasian, so we're in an interracial relationship. I was born and raised up till about 7 years old in the Dominican Republic, which is right below Florida, shares the border with Haiti. So maybe you're familiar with that. And then I practice in the state of North Carolina as a clinician. I love working with couples. I'm a big believer in believing in people. When people fall down, I like to be there in their journey to support them, to allow them to be optimistic and to see hope, so that they're able to become their best version and that they're able to show up, in their relationships. And I'm glad to be here with you, to be showing up with your audience.
I love it. And it's fun to get to know you. And I know that it's like, hey, we're in this context of the podcast, but when you messaged me, I was like instantly drawn to what you were sharing on Instagram, and your passion, your heart, like, comes through immediately. And so I know this is going to be just a fun way to talk about something that might be like a little bit difficult, but we're going to do it. We're going to get into it. And yay for interracial relationships. My boyfriend is Black, and gosh, I have learned so much about my own white privilege just getting to be in a relationship with him. So it is a beautiful, healing, partnership. And so I love to hear that as well. Okay, let's dive in to this idea of necessary endings. And I want to start with thinking about relationships who have been in relationships for a long time. So, like, let's say it's a couple. I know I have a lot of listeners who are in their late 40s and 50s and 60s, and so for a while, maybe they've had kids, they've seen their kids grown, and all of a sudden they kind of find themselves in a relationship with their partner who they're getting to know all over again, like the empty nest syndrome.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of my clients who come to me who are in that season of life, who are like, okay, who is this person that I've been living with for the past, 15 years or 20 years? I don't know them anymore. And so take us through kind of that moment. I'm imagining that there are people who walk into your office who are kind of in similar positions, who maybe feel like they don't know their partner anymore. And all of a sudden now they're spending a lot of time with that person, and their partner is annoying them and is like driving them crazy, because now all of a sudden they're thrust into like a lot of connection where maybe there's been distractions before. So what are some of the things that you start to notice that come up in your office when there's kind of this shift in dynamics with this partnership, and all of a sudden there's some tension there. There's some annoyance. There's some aggravation. There's a lot of like, I wish she would be this way and I wish she would do this. Take us into how you get back to a place of connection and intimacy.
Yeah. And I like that, the case example that you gave, right? These parents who, they're empty nesters now. And I like to use examples of that because it lets people walk through understanding and learning and growing, I think in an easier way, if you will. So something that happens is that we tend to build a life together. And then as we're building it, we build our own independent life. We get distracted with things like work and our interest and passion and so forth. And the next thing you know, your kids are out of the home and it's you and your partner there. And then you're like, who the hell are you? And then you're trying to get to know them and to build that relationship. So then comes this idea of a necessary ending. And that idea of a necessary ending, I like to look at it as a basil plant. Now, hold on for a second. I want you to think about
Okay.
my mom. She's got a green thumb, so as a kid, I would always mess around at the gardens with her. And I'm not sure if you know this, but with basil plants, when they get to about 4 inches, you want to clip it, and then whenever you cut it at that 4-inch point, you can get that stem and just put it in water, and it'll grow back into a brand new one. How cool is that?
Oh, wow.
So
Cool.
at that point, endings aren't bad at all, are they? We're pretty excited about endings, but we have to understand the whole process with it. So this couple, when their kids head out, they have the opportunity to be confrontational, to be aggressive, to annoy each other, or they could look at what growth can come from this point, right? Now that the kids are not in the home, maybe we could travel more. We can go on dates. We can get to know each other. And I think what's happening is a shift in perspective, being able to look at life with a different lens. And then that allows us to also shift our mood.
I love that. And it's like, thinking about the basil plant, you're so right. Like there is such an opportunity for new growth. And yet I feel like even if it is a beautiful opportunity, there's grief there, like there's still this, you still have to cut it down. You have to like
Correct.
remove the parts that have overgrown, and that's awkward at first. Like I mean, I would imagine, tell me if I'm wrong, that like getting to know the person that you've spent years and decades with all over again, like surely that's not always roses and sunshine and rainbows. Like surely that's kind of awkward, right?
Yeah, and I think it shouldn't always be roses and rainbows and, as my daughter says, unicorns that have glitter all over, because maybe that wouldn't give us that weight of a story that we need. Sometimes it's when we fall, when we bump heads with a partner, that we can look back at each other and say, you know what, we got through that together. So it's that uncertainty, right? First time I did the basil plant, I was like, I'm not sure if this thing's going to live. Right.
Yeah.
And same thing in a relationship. We dance with our partner, but we're not sure if it's going to work out. We have no idea what a year or 5 years will look like from now. And with that degree of uncertainty comes worry, sadness, anxiety, hesitation, to continue to go forth. And I like to encourage people to push towards optimism, to push towards their willingness to try, their willingness to do independent work, so they can lower some of those walls and then be open to one another.
So good and so important. And I'm just thinking like, so I've been in a relationship. I was married for 10 years, got divorced, and then have been in a relationship with my partner now for 4 years. And we joke that both of us have grown so fast that we're kind of like rapid growth people, however you would say that. And we've changed so much, like within 4 years. I mean, I feel like every year we're kind of looking at each other going, who are you? Like you were not the same person I knew a year ago. And so even for me, like not having children, not being in a space where I'm an empty nester, there's still sort of this natural change that happens individually. Like I am so not the same person. I mean, God, especially this year, it's like I am not the same person I was in January 2020 as I am now. Like I think we could all say we have changed a lot because we've either been forced to or we've been invited to. And so even in that kind of situation, I feel like there are seasons, maybe it would be a way of saying it, like inside of a relationship. And I would love just to kind of hear your thoughts about how you see people navigate just inevitable changes, like as people change individually, like how to navigate that when you have a partner who's been the same partner, for even if it's a short time. How do you navigate as the individuals shift and change and grow? Hey y'all, I'm sure you've been hearing me mention my Fully Alive Circle membership, and you might be wondering what it is and how you can join. So let me tell you a little bit about it. So the Circle membership is a safe place for women to gather together in a heart-centered community to take this deep dive into personal transformation. So it's my online membership where you'll learn how to find yourself again through daily devotional practices. Inside of our private Facebook group, I share resources like guided meditations, yoga practices, essential oil recipes, journal prompts, and so much more that dive into our monthly topic that we explore right here on the Living Fully Alive podcast. And all those resources are delivered to your inbox weekly to help you create powerful change in your life. So if you're looking for an affordable way to continue your journey of living fully alive, then definitely check out the Fully Alive Circle membership. Just go to maryhyatt.com/circle and you can find out all the details and join. All right, now back to this week's episode.
I think you shared something really important, and unless I caught it in a different angle, but it seemed that your partner was very willing to accept your change and celebrate it. Whenever we begin relationships, we often begin them on this yin and yang, on this opposite. You see your partner, and there's certain strengths that they have that you celebrate. For me, I lose my keys, and I am so thankful that my wife is detail oriented. But then comes difficult moments in your relationship, and I know all of you out there probably have experienced this, where you're so upset with your partner that the differences is exactly what you attack. You're like, darn it, why are you always so organized? Can't you just be spontaneous? But when things are calm and the water's at ease, you celebrate those differences. But so seasons do enter relationships, just as you shared. Where we grow as individuals. Maybe we have kids, or kids leave, or we don't have kids, or we let go of cultural norms that followed us through generations. And what's helpful is to have someone by your side that agrees to be in that journey. And sometimes we forget that. We forget the notion that the entire relationship is a voluntary basis, right? We are here because we choose to love the other person. So if I choose to love the other person, then I'm also going to choose to show up with kindness, with respect, with compassion. Otherwise, what am I doing in this space?
Yeah. I'm just like laughing because I'm like thinking about my relationship with Bentley. And I would have said at the very beginning, like one of the things that I've loved about him is that he is very relaxed, like super easygoing, where I'm a little bit more like, let's go. Like I'm very fast paced. And he really taught me how to slow down, how to like rest. Like I remember in the mornings we'd be laying in bed, and I like to get up early. I love my mornings. I love like getting out and doing things. And he loves to sleep in on the weekend. And that was beautiful. Like at the beginning, I was like, oh, this is so nice. We get to cuddle in bed. And then eventually, as time went on, I was like, oh my God, like get up, like, let's go. We got things to do. Like, why are you so slow? Like, come on, like, go faster. And it's been so interesting to see like kind of this evolution of moving into a place of judgment. Like the thing that I appreciated and loved about him became something that annoyed me, something that would frustrate me, that would kind of build up in resentment over time. And I remember having a conversation with my therapist, and there was sort of this moment I had to decide, either I come back to a space of acceptance with this, or I say, you know what? How can I choose to love this part about him versus expecting for him to move at the pace that I do, or that my pace is somehow superior or somehow right. And that I had to sort of like my necessary ending of that was like to let go of this need or attachment that he needed to sort of get to be where I was. and learn how to appreciate, kind of go back to where I started at the beginning, is appreciate those differences, appreciate that he operates so differently, and that his internal clock is just wired like so differently, and that how beautiful, like how I can like look at that and admire that and appreciate that. And now like we've kind of just created a new space where I let myself get up in the mornings and he can sleep in, and neither one of those are better or right. It's just how we want to go through life and experience. Now, yeah, we had to sacrifice not getting up at the same time, but it's like I get to enjoy my mornings, he gets to enjoy his sleep, and it works. And so
Mm-hmm.
there's sort of this fluidity that had to happen of like me kind of getting out of my expectation brain and coming back to how can I look at him and appreciate the totality of who he is, like what makes him up. And that's not easy to get to.
Yeah.
I
And I
mean,
think that
I know that
highlights.
that's got to be normal, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, you are, what's the saying that we use? The hitting the nail on the hammer. Is that it? Or
Yeah,
something
hitting
like
the
that,
nail on the
right?
head. Yeah,
There we go.
yeah,
But you're saying it perfectly, right? You're in this relationship, and he was doing something that at some point was okay, and then you became frustrated by it, and you had the opportunity to continue to push change, which could create more conflict. And it often does in relationships. We have these pet peeves or these areas of our partner that
yeah,
really annoy us. It could be that your partner shows up late, that they lose things, that you told them something and then they forget it. But that's the exact same person who that individual was when you first met them. So they haven't changed.
right.
It's just maybe you're looking at them as a possession versus accepting them whole as who they are.
Mm,
And when you reach that point, when you were able to maybe sit down with your counselor or independently and say, you know what, I'm going to be okay with waking up early, doing my thing, and then he's going to, sleep in, relax, take his time. That was the end of a season, right? You reached a necessary change that allowed your
yeah,
relationship to continue to grow. And I think when we look at necessary change, it's important to acknowledge that whether it's positive or negative, it's difficult. A college student who's a senior, and they're looking back and saying, man, I've had a lot of good beers during those 4 years. And now they've got to graduate, just as an example of beers, but it could be they had a lot of good reading of books, if you will. But they had an awesome 4 years, right, at their university. They're going to be ending that season, and that's going to make them sad in a lot of ways. That's going to make them,
mm,
anxious and worried. But we acknowledge that was 4 awesome years that they had. So that's a
yeah,
positive experience of ending, yet it still provides, some changes in mood. And then there's ending on the
yeah,
other end where you're really struggling to get out of a toxic relationship. Because though on a rational level it's toxic, maybe you grew up in a household where you were accustomed to it. So your threshold for toxicity was very different than others. And even though people around you told you, hey, it's time to leave, you really didn't want to. So at that point,
yeah.
we're able to look at that, the negativity from or toxicity from that ending and how it still correlates and relates to the other one that we discussed.
Oh, gosh. I mean, I can't tell you how many people I have known, and even myself included, who've like stayed too long. Where you're so right, like people have said, "Hey, you need to leave," or "This is unhealthy," or "This is toxic," and yet myself included, like have stayed too long, stayed in relationships that were either dead or that were close to being dead or that were abusive or just unhealthy for a variety of reasons. Because as you were talking, I was thinking like, you know, okay, I kind of got to the place with Bentley where I chose to love and accept him for who he was. And like the reality is him wanting to sleep in an hour later than me doesn't actually affect the quality of my life in a negative way. Like I had to release an image that I had in my head around healthy couples have to wake up together. And I had to kind of go,
Hmm.
okay, what if I could change that rule? What if I could release
Yeah.
that and then create space for a new kind of partnership? But I'm thinking there's got to be times when like it's not okay to accept something about your partner. So what are some of those kinds of things where you go like, okay, there's times when I need to like get okay and come back to a space of love and acceptance. But what happens when, or how do you know when it's sort of like, actually, that's not healthy to get okay with that? Like, what are the, I don't know, red flags or things to look for where you go, nope, actually, I don't need to be okay with that.
Yeah, and as we dive into this pool, I think this is a deeper one, which takes a lot more time to really understand, is death. But we'll play around with it with like an introductory point of view. I think that when we look at when it's not okay, it's these red flags of, am I being abused, whether it's physically, emotionally. Um, do I feel that I'm losing myself as I'm growing in the relationship? And some people out there, you
Mm,
probably relate to that. Before your relationship, maybe you were this bubbly person. Your friends would describe you as X, Y, and Z. And then months, years into the relationship, you're described a little bit different. You don't feel the same. You don't feel your authentic self. And that's not what a relationship is supposed to do. A relationship is supposed to allow you to shine bright, right? It's like that dimmer
mm,
light. The relationship lets you go all the way to be your full, authentic self, if you will. And it can become really difficult to exit these relationships because maybe you're afraid of, what
mm,
if I'm financially stuck? What if my partner works and I don't? Or you have this idea that the children need a family, and a family where everyone's in the home. And sometimes what I share with couples is that, I get that idea that you don't want to separate your kids, but at the same time, does that mean that you acknowledge and accept that you're allowing your children to see fights, conflict, parents never kissing, parents never hugging? Because our kids are going to do roughly what we did. They're going to mirror behaviors, and they're going to copy, and they're going to continue those generational patterns. So that becomes difficult. Confrontation becomes difficult. Do I confront my partner on being able to leave? And there's these two core areas that typically help us to exit, to have that necessary ending. It's courage, having the courage in that moment to um, give yourself voice, to give yourself strength, and then having the wisdom to look at tomorrow. If I make this
mm,
decision, what's my life going to be like in a day from now, 5 months from now? Often, when we get stuck and we're not able to make these decisions, it's because of this idea of hope, and it's hope without rational thinking. So, as an example, I could be
yeah.
in a relationship where my partner degrades me, right? She's really negative, and um, just on a daily basis, my self esteem is just dropping. Um, and then I sit down with you, right? And then you tell me, you're like, Juan, you really got to get out of that relationship. And I tell you, you know what? We went to the beach the other weekend, and it got a little bit better. I think things are going to be okay. And then you look at me,
Mm,
you say, listen, Juan, we've been friends for years, and you've been dating her for years, and this is a pattern. Every couple of
yeah.
months, you guys do this, and I get there's a part of you that still loves her, but it's just a cycle. So there's where we have that dance between hope and the current reality of what's really taking place. And hope can
Mm,
often trick us into continuing to believe that it's going to work based off of our subjective thoughts versus what's really been happening. Let's put this on paper and look at it as a timeline. And as
yeah.
and as I continue to be in that hole, and I'm not exiting that relationship, what I'm doing is I'm engaging in what's called like unnecessary pain, because in reality,
Mm,
when it comes to a necessary ending, there's going to be pain, right? If I leave college, I'm experiencing pain because those were 4 years where I got some of the best beer on mom and dad's pocket, right? But now I'm experiencing pain because I'm losing that. So then,
mm,
whenever I'm in this difficult relationship with my partner, that added additional unnecessary pain, it can actually break me down so much where it hurts my courage and my strength to get out. And then it adds to that cycle of not just abuse, but the cycle of going into one abusive relationship to a secondary and tertiary and so forth.
mm. Oof. I can so just relate to this so deeply. And I just think about like recovery meetings that say, like, the first step of any kind of 12-step recovery, which is my life has become unmanageable. Like I finally admit that my life has become unmanageable. And what that speaks to me is this idea of kind of radical honesty
Yeah.
that when a relationship hits that point where it is costing sanity, peace, sleep, health, everything in between. I mean, to me, I think the hardest part is getting to where we are not in denial and can see it plainly. That doesn't mean, like, for everybody listening, obviously, in every situation that means you have to leave, because there's a lot of times, and I would love to talk to you about this one, like where you do notice that something is, maybe there's a toxic pattern at play. Maybe there's old attachment wounds coming up. Maybe there are, even old resentments. Like I think about one of the things I know we wanted to chat about was just that idea of like infidelity or past wrongs or past hurts or deception or whatever that are still lingering. And not that that's always like a green light to exit the relationship, but there is this sort of moment of like, we got to get real clear and real honest about the state of this relationship. Like,
Mm-hmm.
where do we start? Like, where do, like this is the radical honesty is the point of starting moving from denial. So from that place, like when you've got all this shit from like past, even with, I mean, really like past relationships, whether it's your own or like family relationships or dynamics or whatever, like how do you move forward when there's been some kind of infidelity, like literally or figuratively?
Yeah, so like you're asking from a past one, and then you're kind of bringing that into the relationship, and then you were trying to find a necessary ending, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think that, as we go into relationships, it's always important for us to have this idea of, I want to be whole prior to being in a relationship, which is awesome as that sounds. It's so difficult because life is a journey and we're always becoming a better version of ourselves. But with that idea in mind, if you're whole, that means that you're able to, cultivate your own happiness. You're able to allow yourself to have a high self-esteem, a high self-confidence, a high self-worth, and then you're not dependent on your partner for those things. So if you have an individual, let's say, that has experienced hurt, infidelity, betrayal in their past relationships, and they haven't healed, what can take place is that that person enters a relationship and they push their partner to change who they are. Maybe they're always wanting to check their phone, or he tells her, "I don't want you to work. I want you to stay at home." But it's not because he wants her to stay at home to give her a break or to whatever positive reason you can think of. It's because of that fear of insecurity. It's because of jealousy. It's because of what if she cheats on him, just as what happened in the past. So then we're not reaching, right? This person, he's not reaching that necessary ending. And because of that, it's continuing to add further pain and unnecessary pain to the relationship, and allowing those two individuals to grow further apart. So
Mm.
what's helpful is the idea of two people sitting down and allowing each other to coach the other person, right? Because you're agreeing to be life partners, right? And life is, till death do us part, if you will. So if you're able to have that vulnerability and accountability with your partner, where you could sit down and say, "Hey, you know what? It feels like you're always asking to see my phone. Can you kind of share with me why?" And then again, you're listening and you're being vulnerable. You're able to say, well, here's why. I was hurt in the past. I was betrayed. So I want to see your phone in case you're doing something, right? At least we're having the conversation now. These two people are, and it lets them to build on some healthy steps moving forward.
Yeah. So tell me this, because I think that like in theory, this sounds great. And in theory, it kind of sounds easy. Like, okay, yeah, like let's sit down, let's have this conversation. But even getting to the point of being able to have a conversation like that requires like a lot of trust and a huge amount of vulnerability. So if you maybe don't feel safe having those conversations, or you're like, just the confrontation itself is scary, how do you like gently walk into creating a space where like this is where it's not going to turn into a fight, it's not going to turn into a blow up or a blaming game or whatever? Like, for people that just like, that feels so terrifying to have a conversation where they say like, I'm really scared every time you look at your phone. Like just even saying that feels like, well, what if they leave me if I say that? How do you baby step people into having conversations that are more honest and more vulnerable?
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. I'm glad you pointed it out. Often what clinicians share, you listen to it and you're like, that sounds like some really good shit, but
Yeah.
big BUT, there's some a lot of steps you skip there.
Yeah.
I like to play with different creative ideas like writing.
Mm,
Carry a journal between you and your partner where you both agree on a rule and you do a firm handshake that whatever goes into that notebook does not become spoken language. You don't speak out loud about it. And what
mm,
happens is that whenever you write things down, you reread it before you share it with somebody else. It allows you to look at your tone, what you're saying. Is it respectful? Is it kind? And so forth.
mm.
So that I found very helpful with couples, especially couples that struggle with conflict in their relationship. Another avenue is having a therapist on call. Have that mediator there where you're able to go and have those serious conversations,
Yeah.
giving yourself baby steps within the relationship. A typical example of that is instead of every day just saying, "Hey, how was your day?" Dig a little bit deeper. Say, "Hey, what was the funniest thing that happened today?"
Mm,
Or if you guys are hanging out, what's one of your most difficult to share childhood experiences? So what you're doing is, in a very unique way, you're digging just slowly. You're peeling that onion layer, if you will, that allows the person to be more vulnerable and more open and more honest with you, so that by the time you get to those serious conversations, that rapport has already been developed and built,
yeah.
because it can't just show up. And it's also important for us to have conversations on our childhood where you're able to ask your partner questions like, did you grow up in a house where you guys got to talk about how you felt? Or did dad say, stop crying? That's weakness. Because if
Mm-hmm.
dad said, stop crying, that's weakness. And that means that in your relationship, it may manifest and show up in the same way.
Yeah. Totally. Well, and I know that like for me, one of the things that's been really helpful is kind of knowing that my partner doesn't always have the bandwidth to like have some of those more challenging conversations. Like sometimes I have an agenda and it's like, I want to deal with this because I'm feeling anxious inside and I want to calm that anxiety really quickly. But one of the things that I think is so powerful is to sort of slow down and to make sure that both people are sort of like willing to have and engage in that kind of level of depth and conversation. Cause sometimes it's like you go in like hot and heavy, like, asking some of these deep questions and the other person's like, I'm just trying to eat my dinner. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
not
exactly.
up for it. And so one of the phrases that Bentley and I use often when we want to have maybe a conversation that could take some time or could be emotional or could be vulnerable, like we'll just say, do you have the space for this right now? Like
I like
basically
that.
like, you up for it? Like, can we go there or not? Because I want to respect the fact that if I want the best case scenario to happen, which is we come to some kind of understanding or healing or agreement, it's sort of like the starting point has to be set up in a way that both parties are willing and there and on their own accord. Like I think the worst in times where it's just, gone all wrong and gone haywire is when I forced a conversation to happen where he wasn't ready or he wasn't willing to have at that time. And because of, again, my own insecurity or my own anxiety, it's like I pressed the matter or forced the matter. And then all of a sudden they're on the defense. It's just so awkward as opposed to two people who are open and willing. And it's just sometimes nice to just ask that, like,
Mm,
how are you feeling? Are you up for this at this time? Like, I don't know, maybe he had a really hard day. Maybe he's just exhausted. He didn't have the bandwidth, but having that mutual respect to kind of pause to say like, is now a good time? And then proceed and going, you know what, even if it's not now, like, can we revisit this soon? Like, can we, like, if he says, hey, I just don't have it to give tonight, it's like, great. Um, would it be okay if I asked you about this tomorrow? Could we revisit it, within 24 hours? And then they're sort of like, hey, we're not just forgetting about it. There's intent to get back to it, but that I can kind of respect where he's at in that moment. It just sets us up for more success that way, I think.
yeah, no, I think that's perfect. It's almost like you and I had the same experience within our relationships. You know, with that experience that you shared, it's nice to see that the necessary ending led to growth. And I think
Yeah.
that's something that if we're all able to take away from, what's the purpose of an ending? And the purpose of the ending is to allow something to grow. So just like that basil plant, you clip it,
Mm,
but it's so that it can continue to grow and to be stronger, more effective, better, if you will. So, your experience like mine, I'm the same way where there's certain topics come in my mind, and then I'll go to my wife and I'll just start blabbering. And then she's like, you need to stop. I am exhausted. I just got done with Alex and he was just blah, 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 blah. And then, there could be that part of my personality of the reaction of defensive walls of like, internal voice that goes, well, hold on, I'm just trying to share something and I'm your husband and we're supposed to communicate. But then,
right.
it's reaching the season, right? The season ends and I need that ending to go, no, I need to understand her. I need to acknowledge that, this is like my personality part trying to project out, but let me bring that back. And then just like what you're doing, use like some kind of code word to give ourselves space to have those conversations. And then
Mm.
that in itself allows for a much better and healthier relationship.
It's so powerful. It's just like the power of the pause, like slow down, which I need
Mm-hmm.
to hear a lot. Like, Mary, slow down, like just hang out for a second. Sit in the discomfort of that anxiety and whatever I've got that I feel like is so urgent, and just go, you know what? Like, setting it up for success is so much better than trying to like give me a quick hit of taking this anxiety away. But so as we kind of like not fully wrap up, but we're headed there. I do want to touch on this idea of divorce, because I think that like this year in particular, I have known more people who are getting divorced than I think probably any other year, which makes total
Yeah.
sense. I mean, it's a setup, right? Like, okay, now you're at home with this person that you've probably only spent a matter of 3 hours a day with. Now you're spending 12 hours a day with every day. And the stuff is going to come up. I mean, I was just like joking. I'm like, either a lot of babies are going to get made or a lot of divorces are going to happen, and probably a little bit of both. It's like, you're going to
Yeah.
know one way or another after 2020, where it stands. And I think that there's sort of a flippant energy towards marriage nowadays of like, if in this moment we disagree, or if my partner's experiencing depression and I go, I just can't handle that, like I don't want to be with a depressed person, knowing that there are seasons where people can be depressed and then they move out of it, and that there's none of us are staying in one place. I'm curious to know, because like when you think about reasons to get divorced, now I grew up like really conservative Christian, so basically like the only real reason would be like some form of serious abuse. And now being a divorced woman and not being in a relationship that was extreme abuse, and I did choose to leave that marriage, I'm curious to hear like what you would say, like when is it okay to call it, like when do you see like, you know what, outside of abuse, here's some other reasons where you go, you know what, it's not salvageable, like we aren't going to be able to recover, versus just sort of that temporary, I don't really like you much right now, or I'm kind of exhausted by you, or sort of the natural highs and lows that all relationships go through. Like, when do you know when it's a low that's like, now's the time to actually leave and walk away? Like, do you have criteria for that or anything?
Yeah, that's such a tough question. And I'd like to
Yeah.
start it like in the easiest way possible, where it's the big red flags, right? You're in a relationship where there's domestic violence
Yep.
and it's loud. That's a relationship where because of the abuse and the violence and probably the self-esteem going down and confidence and inability to function in life due to all the abuse, that we need to terminate that relationship and create healing and recovery. um, I think that if we look more at individual base, and I do this when I work with couples, I ask them to focus on their happiness and then what happiness they could provide towards the relationship. And sometimes people go in different directions. You shared your example where you like to wake up early and
Yeah.
your partner doesn't. And then for some people, if they continue to just fixate on it and say, well, if you're not waking up early with me, that means you don't care and you don't spend any time with us. And it becomes an all or nothing. And the other partner goes, well, we have the afternoon to spend time with, and or the weekend or other times. Well, no, I don't want that. You know what? I just can't do this.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that takes place sometimes where people make those decisions, and maybe later on decisions come back and bite them in the butt, or maybe not. Maybe they find something else. So it's difficult from this perspective to be able to tell people, hey, you shouldn't give up there, or you shouldn't do that. I like to look more at, let's say, wisdom from a perspective of, if you take these steps and create this type of change, such as if you take these steps and acknowledge that your partner from the beginning, like to sleep in and they like to relax a little bit more, and you appreciated that in the beginning. So what happened in your life independently? When did you stop appreciating that about your partner? And it's often these individual notions, like independent changes that take place within a person, that allow them to stay or to exit a relationship. I know I kind of went everywhere there. I'm sorry.
No, it's great. And, it's like, I think that the fact of the matter is it's not a one size fits all. It's like you can't necessarily check off a list of boxes to say when it's time. And I feel like what I tell people that I speak with, like on a non-professional basis, like friends of mine that have been walking through sort of this, like, do I get divorced or do I leave? Or, that kind of questioning. To me, it's like, you're going to know when you know, and you won't know any sooner than that. Like, it'll be very, very clear. And I think in any relationship, there's these moments of questioning and doubting or frustration or whatever, because we're human and we're dealing with another human. And there's this, that's the reality of sometimes the tension, and what is also like so ripe for beauty of healing and growth and all of that. But to me, it's like, you'll know when you know. I mean, it's like the not profound advice that I tend to give people of like, sometimes it's as much as, hey, you recognize that you get in a car wreck and they're not the first person you call. They're not your in case of emergency, and you go, whoa, that's really telling. Or it could be you find yourself fantasizing about other people, and that becomes something that takes on a life of its own. And eventually you realize, wow, this is a symptom of something else that's going on. Or like you mentioned, you notice and your friends start telling you, man, you're not the same person. Your light has dimmed, you're a half version of who you were. So I think you're so right. And that it really is like a case by case kind of situation. But I think going back to those two words that you used at the beginning, like courage and wisdom, like that's so applicable here as well. Like the courage to use your voice when needed, and the wisdom to discern if and when it's time to leave. Because my personal belief is we will know, like that we have, whether it's higher power, intuition, whatever, like there is that still small voice that if you get really quiet, like, know when it's time to walk away.
Very well put. There was one aspect I wanted to share, if that's okay.
Yeah.
With necessary endings. And this one hits from like an upbringing and a cultural perspective. So maybe some people may appreciate it. And I kind of use myself as an example. So I'm Hispanic, born in the Dominican Republic. And within that cultural background is this idea of the man within the home and the woman within the home. So going into my relationship, and again, my wife, she's born here in the U.S., in North Carolina, in our state, and we entered the relationship. And as we entered it, I noticed that a lot of my cultural norms would come in. And the example I'll share with you is our kids. I did not want them to be in daycare. And it was because, I grew up where family would take care of them. And my wife's like, what? She's like, no, I was in a church daycare and I had a nanny over here. And I was just so opposed to it. And then she would say, well, why? Well, and I would say things like, well, that's not your family. And maybe something could happen. And I noticed that it was never strong enough. And we would bump heads on it. And the bumping heads hurts the relationship. And it wasn't until we kind of had a conversation as far as, well, where did this really come from? Like, is it your voice? Is it you saying this? Is it me saying that I don't want my kids in a daycare? Or does it come a little bit further down the line in that generation? And it does, it did come from just a generational pattern.
Yeah.
And it was one that it reached a season, just like winter will reach a season. That one reached a season, and we were able to, continue to support and heal our relationship and reach a place of stability. So as you're kind of listening in, I think something that's helpful is for you to look at a very individual, independent base. Like, what are my beliefs? If you're a male out there, what do you think that the man of the house or the man of the family, or you as that male, what does that look like within your relationship? And is it based off of your visualization, your upbringing and what parents and grandparents have said, or is it something that you and your partner are creating? And from the other perspective too, is it something that, you've chosen to do, or something that has been decided for you and then you're continuing to do? Often those are elements that continue to just play within the relationship and can cause hurt. So if you're able to really pinpoint them, as the example that I gave you, then you can give that a necessary ending and then create something really beautiful from it.
Oh, so good. I mean, I just love that idea of like walking away from those old belief systems that really aren't yours to begin with. Those generational patterns, generational expectation, cultural expectations, whatever it might be. And just like you said, it's like the update of like, wait a second, is this my voice or is this somebody else's? Is this old or is this really relevant to how I think, how I believe, what I deem as valuable and important to me? And the willingness to look at that and the willingness to walk away from those old generational kind of passed down roles that have been set up, and to be willing to like create new ones. I mean, I think that's like a great example of like leaving inside of a relationship, like old ways of operating together and going, wait a second, like maybe we need to update this. Maybe we need to like redo this because actually we don't want to do that like that way, the way my parents did it or grandparents did it or whatever. And it's a form of an ending and stepping into like this version that you guys as a couple, as partners, are creating together. You're so right. It's so beautiful. And I love that. I just love that so much. And I just think that this whole conversation is, and I know we talked about all different types of kind of the seasons of relationships and endings inside of relationships, endings of how we view our partner, and the willingness to let go of resentments inside of relationships, the willingness to kind of end old attachments that we had to toxicity and drama or abuse, and being willing to step into healing, necessary endings around like physical, like actually leaving relationships that aren't serving us anymore, that aren't healthy. And so I'm curious for everybody who is listening, who is like, okay, this is great. This is the beginning of peeling back that layer to the onion, and they want to do more work with you. Is there a way for people that can do this? Like, where do people find you? How they can get connected with you to go deeper? Tell us where the people can connect with you.
Yeah, absolutely. You can connect with me on Instagram. It's Santos_counseling with no G. And from there, what I like to offer is coaching. We go into whether it's independent coaching, one-on-one, or coaching within your relationship.
Beautiful. And you also have like several programs, right? Or like courses that people can purchase as well?
Correct. Yeah. So if maybe you're not ready for that one-on-one work, there's courses that I offer. There's a course for men, how to be a better husband within your relationship. And there's courses for couples, whether you're struggling in your relationship or you're looking for a way to build that connection once again. The courses are all inclusive, where you get, excuse me, a lot of video lectures that walk you through step-by-step play of, the changes that we can take on in our life and within the relationship. as well as a lot of worksheets so that, you have homework. You're able to say, okay, now I'm learning how to love myself. And here's an exact worksheet that lets me go through that process.
Awesome.
And all of that I can share with you.
Perfect. Well, I will link to all of these resources for you guys. So at any stage you want to begin this work deeper, I highly recommend working with Juan, working with a counselor, working with a coach, getting that support that you need, because this is, we touched on the surface, but this is deep, and this is deep, beautiful, healing, hard, messy work. And so it's so nice to have a guide. So Juan, thank you for just contributing to this conversation on necessary endings and offering your expertise about what that looks like inside of relationships. It was such a good conversation. We even managed to have a few laughs. So I love that.
Yeah.
And thank you. I appreciate you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, guys, we have one last episode in this conversation around necessary endings next week. So make sure to tune in and to remember that the purpose of life is to be grateful, to be great, and to be full. I'll talk with you guys next week. Bye. Hey, y'all. Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. I hope you got some amazing nuggets to take home and start implementing into your life. And if you're looking for the show notes and links, head on over to maryhyatt.com/show. And if you loved it, why not bring your girlfriends along this journey of becoming fully alive with you? Just give a quick share of this episode to your social channels and enjoy those debriefing convos with your besties. Thanks again, and I can't wait to connect with you next week.